To talk about today is it'll be a little different from what you're accustomed to. I'm going to talk about how we walk bipedally, why we do it, because I want you to know it's a weird way to get around, folks. I know you guys spend your lives looking at people as bipeds, and we are, but don't think we're normal. No other mammal's ever done this. Can the fastest human on the planet, think about this, the fastest human on the planet, a guy named Bolt, what a great name for a fast guy, he can't catch a rabbit. He can't catch a dog. He can't catch a house cat. He can't catch a squirrel. Folks, we are incredibly slow. You know, they call us man the hunter. What are we hunting? Slugs? Yes. So there's a whole lot that goes wrong with our system. And that's let's face it, you've made a career of this, fixing what goes wrong in the system. Well, I'm going to talk about some of that. I start with this because this is really an important statement, and I'm sure it's a very famous statement, and some of you, I'm sure most of you have probably seen it. But nothing does make sense in biology, and I would stretch that, and I would say in medicine, I would say in dentistry, for God's sake, in anything that has to do with human biology, nothing makes sense except in the light of evolution. Now look at this. I told you how slow we are, and we have, in order to allow us to do this, we've had to take a system that was, for millions of years, modified, adapted to walking on all fours. And that's how you're supposed to walk. Well, we don't. So we took it and we stood it upright. And then standing it upright, you know what happens? Okay, well, I'm just going to give varicose veins. No, mammals don't get varicose veins. We do. Hemorrhoids. Other mammals don't get hemorrhoids. How about hernias? Femoral and inguinal hernias. They don't get those. We get them. We end up with herniated disc in our back. And I will guarantee you, if you're over the age of 40, if you get an x-ray of your spine, you have osteoarthritis. Guaranteed. Now, what's going on here? Well, it's because remember, evolution doesn't make perfection. It makes things work. If you live long enough to have babies, you've done your job. That's the end of it right there. So that's the system we're working with. Now look at these guys. One of these animals is not like the other, and it's not because they're carrying a Kalashnikov. It's because they can carry a Kalashnikov. So walking upright means we can carry things. You would never mistake these two from half a mile away. You know, you're not going to say, gosh, I can't tell if that's a camel or if that's the guy in Argyle socks. Well, you know, the point is, it's a strange way. And you know, you don't learn how to walk until you're about 9 years old, really. It takes that long to work those musculoskeletal systems and the neural systems, the pathways, to allow you to walk. And if you've ever watched a little kid walk, they don't do very well. And of course, we got our big brains. Everybody likes to say, oh, yeah, we're very smart. Yeah, we are the most intelligent animal on the planet. Okay, fine, I got it. But, you know, the chimpanzee's not far behind. And we make tools because of our big brains. Yeah. Now, this is a plaque that they put on the side of the Pioneer and the Voyager, I might add, spacecraft that they sent out into deep space. And it went, and you can, you know, if you look at this, what it did, it went on a slingshot around Jupiter. It's now further out in space than anything else we've ever sent. And on the side of it, they put this plaque, which is solid gold. Well, no, it's not. It was meant to be solid gold, but NASA ran out of money. So it's aluminum and coated in gold. So if anybody ever finds it, they're going to say, I don't know these humans, but they apparently are cheap. But at any rate, they put this on the side of it in case somebody finds it out there. Now, I'm just telling you this because this is a great story. You see these two weirdos here? Well, when they show this, because NASA has to beg for their money from Congress, they showed them this plaque. And there's a guy, now, if you're my age, you remember this guy, but most of you probably don't. A man named Jesse Helms. Jesse Helms makes Donald Trump look like a Bolshevik. He was a conservative when conservatives were, God damn it, they were good conservatives. And Jesse looked at this and he said, and I quote, "I will not be a party to the pandering of pornography in space." And so if anybody found this, they're going to say, "Oh, there goes the neighborhood, the humans are here." And he went so far, this is so crazy to me. He went so far that he actually modified the anatomy. And now think about this. If someone does find it, they'll say, well, that looks like it's a grasping organ. Got it. That looks like a locomotor organ. Got it. What the hell is that? Well, I'm not sure what it is, but it's, okay, it's probably, he's not walking on it. He's not grabbing anything with it. But go over here, and she didn't have one, and what's more, there's nothing there to put it in. He made him modify the human anatomy before he would give him money. We sent off something that's not anatomically correct. Can you imagine that? That is crazy. Would we do it today? Yeah, probably. So, okay, this is Charles Darwin. Everything I'm going to tell you about's because of him. He's the most important, had the most important single idea of any individual in the history of our planet. Now, I know the scientific method's more powerful, but it took hundreds of years to figure that out. Interesting question as to why. But this guy has influenced all of our lives. And he told us, these are the 4 great apes. Now, I know you think, well, I'm not an ape. Yeah, you're an ape. And if someone extraterrestrial ever does come down, you know what they're going to say? There are 4 great apes. There's an orangutan, there's a chimpanzee, there's a gorilla, and there's a human. And they're going to say one of these apes is weird because it walks on its hind limbs and it's got a relatively big brain, but we're an ape. I could take those animals and put them on in the anatomy school at Case where I teach, and it could use this by Gray's Anatomy and Grant's dissectors. You'd never know the difference. And now we can take anatomy to the level of this stuff, which is DNA. And this is shocking. We are 99% identical in our DNA to a chimpanzee. You and I are closer to a chimp than either one of us is to a gorilla. That's shocking. It's true. Now, we are closer to each other than a horse is to a donkey, than a lion is to a tiger. Now, you're saying to yourself, well, wait a minute. Lions and tigers, you can get a liger, yeah? Horses and donkeys, you can get a mule, yeah? Does it mean you could get a cross between a human and a chimp? Yeah. I'm not suggesting you do it, but I'm saying it's very likely you could. It takes in a petri dish. Let's just call it that. So meet your cousins. These are your first cousins in a biological sense, the common chimp and the pygmy chimp. But I didn't see anybody knuckle walking when you came in here. You don't have the big tusky canines, and your brain is, 3 times bigger than your cousin. So there are differences. Interestingly, that means that we've underestimated how you go from one thing to another on the basis of changing genes. It's much more complex than we thought. So we're going to go to Africa real fast. This is where I work. That is called the Afar Triangle. You've got the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, and coming down the east coast of Africa, you have the Great African Rift. And what's happening is these plates are pulling apart, and they pull eventually Somalia will end up an island. And the point being is the animals I'm going to talk about come from there, but they don't just come from there, but we can find them. Because if you didn't have the rift that, like a giant Grand Canyon that opened it up, you'd never find the fossils. Well, fortunately, we can find the fossils. And this is what it looks like. It is not a vacation land. You know, this is not a place you go to sit on the beach under the palm trees and drink margaritas. This is a very, very dry desert, one of the hottest places on earth. And on that little place, right in there, a fossil was found. And I'm very proud to say it was found from a team from Cleveland, the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. And that is Lucy, the world's most famous fossil. Lucy is important because she's not only old, but what she told us, and we'll talk about that. How old is Lucy as an individual? I can even tell you. That's the third molar, the wisdom tooth. And the wisdom tooth in a human comes in about 18 or 20. Now, if you look at the first molar and the second molar, they're already worn through the enamel. She's been chewing on them for a while. But the wisdom tooth is just erupted. So Lucy's an adult, but a young adult, so call her 18. How'd she walk? That's the important thing, because if you don't walk bipedally, you're not a human. Now, how do we figure that out? Well, fortunately for us, it's pretty simple. That's a chimp. So the chimp femur goes straight up. Humans, our knees are closer to each other than our hips. We are the most knock-kneed animal on the planet. Think about that. If your dog could talk, he would look at your knees and say, "You are really ugly. What is wrong with you?" We're knock-kneed permanently. Well, that's to get our foot underneath our body. It's called a valgus knee. So here's a human, and you notice how the femur goes out to the hip. There's Lucy, goes out to the hip. Simple. She was already a biped by 3.5 million. How about her ankle? Well, her ankle shows the same thing, because we had to adjust our ankle to allow us to walk upright. Our tibia is vertical relative to the ground, and that means we can load it, but we have to get our foot underneath it. And other animals, their knees are further apart than their hips. They have a varus knee. Incidentally, this whole problem with the tibia is a big issue. Humans are the only animals that sprain our ankles. And I know all of you have seen this 1,000 times. On the lateral side of the human ankle, you've got those 3 little tiny wimpy ligaments. Okay, on the medial side, you get the deltoid. That's big and strong. But on the lateral side, you got nothing. Calcaneofibular ligament, the most common torn ligament in the human body, that is just nothing. So part of the reason we sprain them is because we have our foot directly under our knee. All right, there's Lucy's pelvis, or half of it. There's a chimpanzee pelvis, and there's Lucy. Well, you know, I'm going to tell you, if you remember back to your anatomy, very few people like working on the pelvis in the sense of a cadaver lab, okay? Now, and the reason is there's a lot of stuff in there. I mean, you've got intestines, you've got a colon, you've got a rectum, you've got a bladder, if you're male and female, you've got a prostate, or you've got ovaries. It's a lot of stuff. And you don't go changing that stuff willy-nilly because it's for fun. So you took this perfect pelvis, this chimp pelvis, which is just like a bear or a cow or a horse, it doesn't matter, and you turned it into this. There's Lucy at the top. It's a human at the bottom. They look a lot alike. So why'd you do that? Well, you did it because of this. The big muscles of your hip, we'll just call them the gluteal muscles. You got three of them. You got minimus, medius, and maximus. And I will tell you this. The gluteus maximus is the human's favorite muscle. Now, why would I tell you this? I'll tell you why. Because when I worked at the museum, I had to talk to, third graders. Okay, and I like talking to third graders because they're really smart. And if I said to a third grader, what muscle's this? They say, well, I don't know. And what muscle's that? I don't know. What muscle's this? I don't know. But why would they? They're only in third grade. But if I do this, and I slap my wallet, I will guarantee you 90% of the third graders will scream gluteus maximus. It doesn't tell you much about human anatomy, but it sure as hell tells you a lot about human behavior. But that's a different lecture. So those muscles on a quadruped, when they pull the femur back, they extend the femur, and if your foot's on the ground and there's friction, you go forward. That's the galloping complex. Not so in us. We left maximus, the big guy in the back, same place. But we moved gluteus minimus and medius to the side. And now, instead of pulling our leg back, it does this. It abducts our thigh, pulls it to the side. Now, I know you're saying to yourself, well, we don't do that very often. And if you're not a dancer, or if you don't have a peculiar dog-like habit, you probably don't do it. But think about it. When you stand on one foot, what holds you up? Why don't you collapse on the other side? These guys, the abductors of the thigh. So we had to change our pelvis to change those muscles, the whole line of action of the muscles, and that's why you can stand on one foot. And incidentally, humans are the only mammals that can stand on one foot. So we look at Lucy and we can see that she has this complex. She has a valgus knee, knock-kneed. She has a distal tibia that shows that joint, that the foot was directly beneath the knee. So she was walking the same way. She didn't have to do what this chimpanzee does, which is to stagger back and forth to balance. Now, those very muscles I told you about, the hyenas like them a lot. So the hyenas come in and they eat those big pieces of muscle. But they don't, after they strip those off, they don't go after the hip because there's really nothing there to go after. So we find a lot of proximal femora. And in order to look at those, we just took some humans and just went through sort of a poor man's CT scan, which is a bandsaw, and we cut through them. Now, this is important. That's going through the neck. And I want you to notice, there's the trabecular bone. That's the cortical bone. And look where it's thick. It's thick at the bottom, thin at the front, thin at the back, really thin at the top. Look how thin it is at the top. There's a human right here, thick at the bottom, thin, really thin at the top. There's a chimp. It's a donut of cortex. It's a very strong femoral neck. So what is going on? Well, we couldn't cut up all our bones. So what we did, we CT scanned them. There's a human. Can't miss it. It's 100% diagnostic. Can't miss it. That's a chimp. Can't miss it. So what happened? Here is a fossil that's about 4 million years old, and already it looks like this human. Thick, thin. So it's a very old adaptation. Well, now this caused I can't tell you the problems this caused when we tried to figure it out. Because here's a femur, that's your body weight pushing down on the head of the femur. Here's the shaft, call it the wall, if you will. It's like a diving board, it's a cantilever beam. And when you put it under loading like this, the material at the top is under tension, and the material at the bottom under the neutral axis, for those of you that like this stuff, the stuff at the bottom is under compression. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story here. Bone is very strong in compression. It's like concrete. You can push on it all day long, but you can't pull on it. It's weak in tension. You can't make a suspension bridge out of concrete because it'll fall apart. Well, same with bone. Bone cracks. It comes apart. It delaminates under tension. So none of this is making sense until you think about those muscles, the abductors, the gluteus minimus and medius. When they contract, if you resolve those components, what it ends up doing is it ends up making a compressive force as well as an abductive force, and that cancels out the damaging problem with tension. Now, this is a complex system, but remember, there's something else that only humans get: osteoporosis. This is not a good thing to get. So what happens when you get old? Well, your stretch receptors in your muscles get a little sloppy. The Golgi tendons get a little sloppy. Everything goes to hell. And what happens? You get out of a chair, bang, a femoral fracture. That's a fractured femoral neck. And where does it fracture? Just where it should, where the diving board meets the wall. And this is a devastating problem that only humans get. No other mammal gets this. We spontaneously fracture our hips. And I hate to tell you this, but you probably already know it, that 1 out of 4 people that does this today will be dead within the year. Why? Because of the fractured hip? No, that doesn't kill them. What kills them is they end up in bed and they die of pneumonia. So it is a major, major problem. And we're going to see more and more of this because of our demographics. So thank you, Lucy, for telling us all this stuff. It makes us feel so good about ourselves. Now, that's the human pelvis at the top. That's Lucy at the bottom. Now we're looking down from the head down. It's a cranial view of the pelvis. That is the birth canal. Now, it should be round because a fetus's head is essentially a sphere you're trying to push through that. And let me just tell you this. As a male, I have only witnessed one birth in my life. That was my daughter's birth. And oh my God, it hurt me to watch. Humans have a terrible time in obstetrics. Our brains got too darn big, and we couldn't get them through our pelvis. In fact, why did our brain stop growing? It stopped growing 300,000 years ago, and you want to know why? Because we can't get it through the pelvis anymore. It's a terrible thing. And I just got to tell you a story. This is just for fun. We have so much trouble in getting the kid's head through the pelvis that there is a hormone called relaxin. And relaxin, which biochemically is very much like insulin, but relaxin makes the ligaments become hydrophilic and they absorb water and they become a little bit stretchier, just a little bit stretchier. And that means that you can push the kid's head in there and the ligaments around the pelvis and the pubic area and in the sacroiliac area will stretch a little bit to give a little bit more space. That's how hard it is to do this. Now, when I found out my wife was pregnant, I said, hey, we're going to do an experiment. And I went and I just a protractor like you use, in 8th grade. I get a protractor, and I measured how far we could extend her fingers. I measured it, we got it. And then I said, okay, now when you go into labor and you spike relaxin, we're going to do it again. And we're going to see how much further you can stretch your fingers. She said, okay. This is first trimester. Okay. So she's in labor, right? And she's going through these horrible things. And I went and I got my protractor, and I went up to her and I said, dear, can I measure your fingers? And she told me to put that protractor in places that anatomically I could not do. So it was a failed experiment. I never got to test it, so those of you that have young children, or if you have a wife that's pregnant, I don't suggest you try it. So our big brain gets us in trouble. And look, here's a monkey. This could be any quadruped. There's the sacrum. There's the spine would be over here to the left, or the head would be over to the left. Caudal vertebra, that's the tail. But look at the birth passage. The birth passage is just like, shoo, easy, easy. And if you've ever watched a horse or something give birth, it's like, my God, that just seems so simple. In fact, there's a great YouTube of a chimpanzee at the Cincinnati Zoo. They knew she was pregnant, but they didn't know when she was going to deliver. And somebody just happened to have his cell phone, and he sees this thing going on, and he films it. And here's the female chimp walking across her cage, and she goes like this, whoa, whoa. You know, I guarantee you no human female on the planet will ever go, whoa, look at that. No. Well, because look what we've done to our birth canal. My God. The kid has to go into this thing. It hits its head on the sacrum. Oh, that hurts. It twists and it turns to get its shoulders through the birth canal. It slams into the pubic bone. Ouch, that hurts. It does a complete 180-degree flip. It's the most gymnastic thing you will ever do in your life to get out. And when you do finally get out, you're facing in the wrong direction. You're facing backwards. How's the mom supposed to help you when you're facing backwards? So it's a mess. And midwifery is probably the oldest, I would say probably the oldest thing that humans have ever done, that women help women have babies, because you can't do it by yourself. So once again, thanks, Lucy. Now, you want to know something bad. Well, if you were going to design a human from scratch, you would not do what I'm about to tell you. The human spine is the weak link in the entire system. Because in order to balance, we had to put all of these weird curvatures. We have a curve in our lumbar spine, a reverse curve in our thoracic spine, and another reverse curve in our cervical spine. This is just asking for trouble. Why do we have to do it? Well, we had to do it because we couldn't stand the sacrum vertically, because if we did it, you couldn't get the kid through the birth canal. So we had to make all these curves to balance. And it's just, we had to modify the vertebra, the shape of them. That's a lumbar lordosis. Humans are the only animals that have a hollow in our lower back. We're the only animals that can do this, a back bend. Now, I'm not suggesting, unless you do this for a living or you practice yoga every day, that you try it, but humans can do this. Other mammals can't. And if you don't trust me, go home tonight, take your cat, no, don't touch the dog. Don't touch the dog. But you can take it to cat. No, but you couldn't, you'll kill the animal. And that's why women, when the fetus gets out in front of them and changes their center of mass, it just means that they have to lean backwards to try to balance that thing. It's all a balancing act. And that's why pregnant women have a terrible time with backaches. And we had to change all the joints in our back. And it's a very old adaptation. I mean, you can see it. This is a 3 million year old spine from South Africa, and it's already there. So humans have had to modify our spines to allow us to walk upright. It's probably one of the older adaptations. Now, but nothing, as I told you, nothing comes free. That's the problem. Evolution is nothing but a compromise upon compromise upon compromise. It allows us, that curve in our back, that lumbar lordosis, allows us to stand upright. But the problem is, when you lean back too often, you hyperextend, those joints get pushed against each other. Now, in most of us, it's not an issue. But I'll tell you, in this room, it is an issue for probably 3 of you. There's something I'm going to show you. And you just got dealt a bad developmental card. What do you say? It's the way it is. If you go into hyperextension over and over again, like these athletes do, and it got so bad in the Scandinavian countries that they no longer permit teenagers to do gymnastics in Scandinavia because this was such a big problem. Swimmers get it. The butterflyers and the breaststrokers get it. The volleyball players get it because they all go into hyperextension. And this is what happens. Your last lumbar vertebra, L5, gets pinched between L4 and the sacrum. And it literally breaks off the back. It cuts off the neural arch. And that's called spondylolysis. This is a common problem. 1 in 20 people has it. Now, you probably don't even know you have it because when you're young, it's held in place by ligaments and muscles. But when you get old, I told you, everything goes to hell. Trust me, I know this. That's what it looks like. It literally broke the back of the vertebra. And then this. Because of that curve, remember that red arrow, the big red arrow, that's your body weight. That's the gravity vector. And it pushes down on your sacrum, and it's no longer held in place by bone. And those ligaments stretch, and the muscles get weak, and that thing starts to slide into your pelvis. And the problem is, can't really see that arrow here, but the problem is that drags the nerve root with it, L5. And boy, I tell you what, you don't want to tug on L5. Not only is it going to hurt like hell, boy, does it hurt. But worse than that, L5 does a whole lot of stuff. And it pulls it into your pelvis. And if you think something's going to ruin your day, you wake up in the morning and your spine is sliding into your pelvis, that will ruin your day. And it's a very difficult thing to fix surgically. Spondylolisthesis. Only humans. All right, all those weird curves. Well, we just went through 3,000 skeletons at the Natural History Museum, and we counted up fractures. And it's not surprising, you fracture exactly where you should. You fractured the depth because of the moment arm, if you like mechanics. And you fracture where you expect to fracture. So the most fractured vertebra in humans is T8. Your 8th thoracic vertebra at the depth of your kyphosis in your chest. And after that, it's where that you go from a concavity to a convexity, and that would be L1. So that's where you're getting these hot spots for fractures. And this is common, folks. This is scary how common it is. 700,000 of them a year. 5% of men, 16% of women will get this. And what happens is you crush, it's called a crush fracture. You crush the front of the vertebra. That's what it looks like. You see how that's been crushed in the front? Well, when you crush that, it changes the whole mechanics of the spine. So we went through and we measured bone density. Now, here in Cleveland, I'm proud to say we have the largest human skeletal collection in the world. We have also the largest ape collection, skeletal collection in the world. So we took our apes, our chimps and our gorillas, and we took our humans, females in this case, and we looked at bone density over age. Now, there are the apes. They really don't lose bone. Humans, look at this. You max out at about age 25. That's your maximum bone density you'll ever have. And from that point on, you lose. If you remember back to your physiology, the osteoclasts take over from the osteoblasts, and you're sucking out all that. That's why our astronauts have such trouble. because there's no gravity and the bones don't get strained. And you know what they do? They dump all their calcium. That's why astronauts have a terrible time with this. Osteoporosis, I will tell you this, we will not go to Mars. I know we all like to talk about going to Mars. We will not go to Mars till we solve this, because you will pour those people out of that capsule. They will be amoebas. The guy who holds a record in space, the Russian guy that holds the record for being in space the longest amount of time, he lost 12% of his bone mass, and he can't get it back. It's a terrible problem. And only humans suffer this in a terrestrial environment. We lose bone mass, and it's particularly bad for women because when they hit menopause, which I want to point out, only humans have menopause. When you hit menopause, you stop producing estrogen. Your ovaries shut down. They stop producing estrogen, which is an anabolic steroid, and that you can't put calcium back into your bones. But the osteoclasts keep sucking it out. And so, boom, that's a real problem. And that leads to this. At 60, you hit menopause 10 years ago. You've lost enough bone mass that you crack T8. T8 then changes the shape of your vertebra, and then you break out the guys under it. You break out T12 and L1. And then, unfortunately, you're putting more force on the guys at the bottom, L4 and L5, and you start cracking those. And that's what leads to this. That's why your grandmother gets shorter and shorter. That's why you change the whole profile of the body. So it's what's called the Dowager's profile. It's all because of the way we walk, and that we had to change our bone density to allow us to do it, and it leads to this as you get older. Remember, evolution's a compromise. Now, we looked at this carefully, and if you look at bone size compared to body size, humans have really big vertebrae. And I guarantee you, I know if I was asked in this room, because they told you the same thing they told me when we all took anatomy. Well, the vertebrae get bigger as you go down the spine because there's more force on them. Well, all you have to do is look at a horse or a cow and you see that's not true anyway, but that's what they told us. So we went through and we looked at the size of the vertebra. And humans have bigger vertebrae than you would expect. But if you do a bone density study, our vertebrae are not as dense as apes. They're not as dense as any mammal. So we've reduced the density. And the way we did it is we made bigger vertebra with the same amount of bone mass that a chimp has. And in making it bigger, we made it less dense. Why on earth would you do this? Because you're putting yourself at risk of fracture. Well, that's an awfully good question. And it may be this. Not only can we do a back bend, but we can twist our spines more than other mammals. Again, go home and take your cat. Don't. And the reason is because when we walk, you throw your right arm forward and your left foot forward at the same time. Your upper body is 180 degrees out of sync with your lower body. Twist, 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 twist. Over the course of your lifetime, you do that millions of times. And eventually what happens is that the disc lets go. The annulus fibrosus, that ligament around the disc, finally starts to delaminate, and it does, and then you end up herniating. The nucleus pulposus comes through it. And if you live to be 70, you will herniate a disc. No other mammal does this. Why do we make our vertebra bigger? To preserve our discs. Because your resistance to torsion varies as the fourth power of the radius. So by making it bigger, you made the vertebra weaker, but you saved the disc long enough to have kids. But as you get beyond into your 60s and your 70s, and if you're lucky into your 80s, you will do this. Oh yeah, scoliosis. Well, nobody else gets scoliosis either. That's a peculiar human problem. Interestingly, King Richard III, if you read Shakespeare, he talks about him being a hunchback. Well, he was a hunchback. He had scoliosis. They just found his skeleton underneath some parking lot. He was the last English king to actually go to battle. And no wonder he was the last one. He got killed in battle. The other guy said, I don't think so. All right, well, this hasn't got anything to do with backs or anything. This is just to let you know we're over the hump. Okay, now we're moving south now. Now, I know you look at these every day and you say, well, that's kind of a normal foot. No, it's not a normal foot. That is a bizarre foot. Why is it so strange? That's what your foot should look like. We're arboreal primates. We should have a grasping foot. Every primate we know about, except us, has a grasping foot. Because if you climb in trees and you're 60 foot up in the canopy and you slip, you're not going to contribute to the next generation. It's just that simple. So that's the foot we should have, and that's the foot we came from. Yeah, that's what it looks like. I hope you don't see many of these in your practice, because if you do, it's not a human. That's an orangutan on the left. I mean, you would never mix these two up. So why do we do all that? This is a gorilla and a human, and I'm not going to have to tell you which one is which. God, I hope you know. Incidentally, you have no idea how hard it was to get these two to sit down next to each other. So, once again, I'm proud to say this. As a Clevelander, Ardipithecus was a fossil that was found in Ethiopia. Now, I was part of the team. And it's changed the way we view human evolution. I'm just going to tell you one thing, though. When we're walking, if you go to the Natural History Museum, the curator in physical anthropology there is a guy named Johannes Haile Selassie, who is, I will say this unquestionably, he is the world's best fossil finder. He has named and found more species of humans, ancestors, than any man alive. More than Richard Leakey, more than Louis Leakey, more than Mary Leakey, more than Donald Johanson, more than any of those guys. He's really good at this. So he and I were walking across the plain in Ethiopia. Oh, God, I hate to say this. You know, and we're just talking and blah, 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 blah. And it's 100 degrees and it's hot and you're tired and you're sweaty and you're hungry and you're thirsty and blah, blah. And he suddenly reaches down and he picks up that bone right there, right in front of my eyes. And he goes, oh, what do you think of this? And it's like, God damn it, Johannes. Can't you let me find something? No, he had to find it. Oh, well, this is a very famous fossil. That's what Artie looked like, 4.4 million. But here comes the weird thing about Artie. I never thought we'd find this. Artie, when she's on the ground, walks bipedally. You can tell that from her pelvis and from her tibia and her knee. But she still climbed trees. She still had the grasping hallux, still had the grasping big toe. What a weird animal. Which brings us to this. Why do humans have an arch in our foot? We don't, a lot of us don't. 10% of us don't. 10% of us have flat feet. And what is it about that arch, though, in the first place? Why do we have it? No other animal has it. Well, one problem is this. We hit it 1 foot at a time. We take in our entire body weight through our foot. Now, if you accelerate that at a full run, you're putting multiples of body weight. 3, 4, even 5 times your body mass through your foot, 1 foot at a time. Think about those metatarsals. They're tiny. They should, by all rights, explode. But they don't. Why don't they? And if you want to test this, you can test this. If you put your foot on the ground, or if you get on a chair and jump off the chair and hit the ground. Now, if we put a force plate under there and put a force plate, a force plate would be something like a bathroom scale. You know that scale's going to go, whoa, when you hit the ground, but you don't break your metatarsals. Now, take that same amount of force, take someone your same body mass, put them on the chair, and you put your foot under them and let them jump off the chair and hit your foot, you'll break those metatarsals. Where's that energy going? Remember preservation of energy? Conservation of energy, it just doesn't go away. Where's it go? Why don't we explode? Well, this is why. Because this happens to be a cat, but think about a Siberian tiger. It weighs 800 pounds. Or better even yet, think about it as a Clydesdale horse that weighs, I don't know, what do they weigh, a ton and a half? I don't know what they weigh, but they're big. You accelerate a ton to 40 miles an hour at a full gallop. When it comes down on its hooves, where does that energy go? Because that's huge. Those are tons of force at ground reaction. Where's it go? We don't see horses blowing up all the time, but they should. Well, the reason is this, is that when you're a quadruped, you use your shoulder. This is why your scapula is not attached to your vertebra. It's not like your pelvis. It's got this big envelope of muscles all around it. And those muscles do something called eccentric contraction, which is lengthening contraction. And as they lengthen, they take up the energy, and you can turn it into heat. That's why you sweat when you run. It's why you sweat when you exercise. Because your body can't tolerate kinematic, it can't tolerate mechanical energy, but it can tolerate heat. And sweating, well, that's a whole nother thing. We can talk about that later if you want to. Sweating is a weird way to cool off, but at any rate, that's what we do. So there's that big red arrow is the ground reaction. It pushes you forward, but when you come down here on your forelimb, your shoulder takes up the energy. And it's serratus magnus, what we would call serratus magnus, what a vet would call serratus, we call it anterior, what they call serratus magnus. We can't do that, obviously, because we sacrificed our forelimb in our locomotion. So we've had to do all kinds of little tricky things. All I care about here is that, look at the quadricep. It's biphasic. Quadricep at heel strike, when you hit on your heel, quadricep eccentrically contracts, it elongates, and it takes up that energy. Now you only flex your knee some 10 degrees, 10, 12 degrees, not very far. That's all you can do, because otherwise you lower your center of mass and you got to push it back up, and that gets to be way too expensive energetically. But it does take up that energy. That's why quadricep is so important. So it stops you, it takes up a little bit of energy, and people that end up with premature osteoarthritis in their knees, probably quad is a little bit out of sync. So we don't look like that orangutan. which has a grasping foot, like all primates do. We have this instead. And we have the arch. That's what the arch does. You have more muscles in the sole of your foot than you have in the palm of your hand. Can anybody here do this with your feet? I don't think so. Can you play piano with your feet? No. What are those muscles doing there? You don't use them. Well, you surely do use them. And the way you use them is this. When you step on the arch, it depresses the arch. And that's why we moved our big toe into line, is to create the arch. That's the whole point. And those muscles eccentrically contract, and they allow that energy to be taken up and turned into heat. That's why your feet sweat. If you take a thermal image of a human when they exercise, you light up, it turns red where you're hot. Your feet are on fire. And your feet are on fire because that's where you're dumping all your heat load. And that's why you have all these muscles. It is kind of curious. We do have a couple little muscles there that no other primate has. That little guy in particular, which presumably they always told us is there to change the line of action of the flexors. And maybe it is that. Maybe that's part of it. But it's also there because it allows you, once again, that little muscle, accessorius, it's a tightly pinnated muscle. It's not there for motion. It's there to absorb energy. So that's the whole idea of the human arch in our foot. Now, we also have something that other animals don't have, and that's the plantar aponeurosis. That helps hold your foot together. That's a weird one, too. You can't have an aponeurosis that functions like this if you have a big toe that's sticking out like that. It won't work. So all of these things, we had to bring the big toe into line, and that means that it's all there to allow us to run more force through that foot. But the point is that, remember, it's a compromise. We've got these little tiny bones that should be broken every time we step on them, but they're not. But they are sometimes. Do you want to know why? Why, if you have a flat foot, you can't join the infantry? And this just isn't my idea. The Egyptians knew it. The Babylonians knew it. The Sumerians knew it. Because if you take a man with flat feet and you make him go on a forced march carrying something on his back, what happens to him? Stress fractures in his metatarsals, in his distal fibula, in his distal tibia. It's a major issue because he can't take up that energy and he ends up fracturing. Here's a fun story. This is brand new, folks. I just think this is great. We know what happens to a man when you make him go on a forced march if he has a flat foot. We know this. We've known it for generations, for thousands of years. Okay, we now, for the first time in the history of this planet, are allowing women to join the military if they want to. And they actually now go into battle. Now, it's so typical, the joke is military intelligence, right? Well, the contradiction there is obvious. But they took a male backpack that weighs 60 pounds, and they put it on a woman, and they make her march with the men. And all of a sudden, they found out something new. Do they fracture their feet? No, not like men. You know what they do? They get stress fractures in their pelvis because they have a wider pelvis, and those muscles we talked about, the abductors, have to pull harder and really have to pull harder with a heavy backpack on, and they get stress fractures in their pelvis. I think that's fantastic. Not for them, But from a mechanical standpoint, it's just what we should have expected. And I actually worked on a project with the military to try to figure out a new backpack. Could we do something? And you know, after going through all these tests and all these models and all this, you know what we came up with? Smaller backpacks. I mean, come on, that's all. So we wasted, $500,000 doing all this stuff, and we ended up saying, give them smaller backpacks. So this is not the typical human foot, and it's one that, why is it wrong? Well, it's wrong because it can't absorb that energy. So it's all about the ground reaction force. Now, I've told you that, but really quickly, we're going to go into something else. When you hit a heel strike, I told you use your quad, and you do use your quad. But when you're running and you accelerate your body mass, and I know if you're a good runner, you don't hit on your heel strike. You shouldn't. You should hit midfoot or you should hit in your forefoot. That's what the good runners do, especially long distance guys. But remember, 60% of humans, even the ones that run long distances, hit a heel strike. So that's a major issue. This is before Nikes and before good shoes. Look at that calcaneus. Humans have the largest calcanei of any mammal relative to our body mass. They are giant. And did we increase the cortex? Look at the chimpanzee. That's a solid layer of cortex that goes the whole way around that calcaneus. Humans have no cortex in our calcaneus. It's essentially the same thickness of an individual trabecula. It's just filled with trabecular bone. Now, is it there to make it strong? No, it's just like the vertebra. No, it's not. It's there to make it big, to increase the surface area when you hit a heel strike, but more than that, because the density, the ability to absorb energy is inversely related to the density. By putting in more trabecular, you can actually absorb energy in your calcaneus. And in order to test this, we took people and we put pins in their calcaneus. And we had them walk on a treadmill and we filmed it. And the human calcaneus at heel strike literally flexes. Not much, but it moves. And the faster you go, the more it moves. And the reason this thing has no cortex is because we want it to move, because it absorbs that energy. So that's how big an issue this is. Now, in your guys' case, you know what this means clinically? If you break a calcaneus, if you fall off a ladder and you shatter your calcaneus, they are terrible to repair. Terrible to repair. Because you've got no cortex. It just explodes and comes apart. And it's a very difficult bone to try to repair. Not just our calcaneus, also our distal tibia. Here's the chimp. Look at that cortex, 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 cortex. Look at the human. There's no cortex. That's all trabecular bone. It's the same mechanism to absorb that energy. So how long we've been doing this? Well, this is on the edge of the Serengeti Plain in Tanzania, in a site known as Laetoli, where we have these footprints that were made by our ancestors 3.6 million years ago. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's funny because someone brought this up to me. There is no way in the world you're ever going to go looking for footprints. Ever. Because you're not going to find footprints. That's the craziest thing anyone had ever looked for. Fossils, yeah, go look for fossils. But footprints? No way. You know how they found these footprints? Well, I'll tell you. You'll never find this out in National Geographic, folks. The way they found them is this. When you're out in the desert, like in Kenya or Tanzania or in Ethiopia, and you're there for a month at a time or 2 months at a time, and you're drinking bad water. God, the water's awful. You have to, use all kinds of stuff to purify the water, and the water still smells like hippo piss. I'm sorry, it's true. And you eat bad food. You're eating goat. And I don't know, if some of you like goat, good for you, but I hate goat. You can walk into camp and smell goat and go, oh, God, I hate it. So you've been doing this, and you wake up every morning, and you walk out there, and it's 100 degrees, and the sun's beating on you, and it's just miserable. I told you, that's why I miss that fossil. Anyway, one of the things you do to entertain yourself. Okay, this is kind of a psychosis, though. Think of it, you've been out there too long. What you do to entertain yourself is that well, let me tell you. You know what a cow pie is, right? Cow pies we all see them. Well, now you're on the equator, and you got giraffe pies. And a giraffe pie is about this big, and it gets dry. It gets hot and dries. It's like a giant Frisbee. And if you're careful, you put your hands under it, and you can lift it up, and then you sneak up behind a colleague, and you throw it at him. I know, it's psychosis. I've been hit with a lot of these Frisbees, but I want you to know I've also hit them back. So that's how they find these footprints. They found the footprints because one guy was getting his giraffe Frisbee, and he picked it up and he said, oh my God, there's a footprint. That's how they discovered these. They're not like humans. I know, I'm going fast. There's a chimpanzee. It's not like that. That's what they look like, 3 individuals of our ancestors walking across the Serengeti Plain. That's Mary Leakey, the person that found them. That's a human footprint. That's one of the Laetoli prints. The toe is already in line at 3.6 million. That's another Laetoli print. And incidentally, I just want to point out, is that a good-looking human foot or what? Yes, it's my foot. And then we found other bones that show that they had an arch, but it's pretty well, by 3.5 million, we already have an arch to our foot. So that's one of the earliest adaptations. And we all know when you get misalignment issues, well, because you're doing ballet or you wear high heels or any number of reasons, but once you get misalignment of the hallux, then you end up with problems, and that's what you guys see every day. And then you can end up with stress fractures because of those. But there's the Laetoli print. So you can see the toes in line. And this is a new fossil we just found, 3.4 million, and it still has a grasping big toe. So there's 2 types of humans running around at about 3.5 million. One has still climbing trees, the other one is not. So that's an artist's idea of what it would have looked like walking across that Laetoli plain. There aren't just human footprints, human ancestors. There are giraffe prints and guinea fowl prints and elephant prints and all sorts of things, baboons. Now we're leaving footprints all over the place. I want to say thank you, Charles Darwin, for letting us figure this out. And what a long, strange trip it has been. Thanks.
That was really great.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to take questions if anybody has any.
Actually, we're going to have, if you can go back there, because we're going to get right with our next speaker.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
I didn't mean to take up your time.
No, you're good. Actually, I wish you can go longer. So thank you, Dr. Latimer.
Thank you.
I think there's going to be a lot. Let's just get done. So anyways, real quick, after this last lecture, we're going to have you scan out, and that'll be it for the seminar. We do have the evaluations that we're asking everybody to please sign, or not to fill out actually, and you can write as much as you like on the back. I'll have some here, raise your hand, or at the scan out we'll have a bunch. And we really encourage you guys to please fill this out. We're trying to make a lot of changes, and I think you can see them. So Dr. Can, what are you talking about?
I have no idea.
Okay, he's going to talk about something.
All right, great. Had to start off with an evolution cartoon, since we're almost done. So before I forget, just want to thank everybody being here and the team that put this together. Dr. Hans, all the unnamed in the back, Roger Friedman, Arnie Milner, they all make this happen. I have no conflict of interest for this talk. Quick commercial, school's right across, stone throws away. If you have a high school kid come into your office, interested in science, college kid, that's the time to plant the seed. We got to grow it for the future. So keep that in mind. All of you should be part of the DPM network. So if there's somebody that lives near you that's interested, they contact this. So reach out. I mean, you'd be surprised how many kids have no idea what they want to do with their life. So this is just something to keep in mind and certainly pursue. So I'd put together this pretty complicated talk filled with demographics and statistics and blah, blah, blah. And then I got the program in the mail, and I realized where I landed in the grand scheme of things. And I realized that it's not going to fly because I'm the closer. I'm the end of the road, the curtain call, the final bow, the 101st Dalmatian, the 99th beer on the wall, okay? Yes, friends, I'm the little red caboose at the end of this love train. I am the fat lady. Well, what's even more disturbing and led to my anxiety is not only that, but I was following Jim Sphere, who was my previous director at the Cleveland Clinic, our section head, and I'm also following this guy, one of the most entertaining people on the planet. So great, I'm Sunday into the talk, so what am I going to do? If I gave my original talk, you guys would go crazy and hang me out to dry, okay? So I threw that lecture out, started anew, put in evolutionary cartoons, and tried to be respectful of your time. So I thought I'd get the most offensive slides out of the way first. So now that we've dispatched with the inappropriate slides. So if you look at these 2 feet, the one on the right, obviously a relatively normal human. The one on the left is the patient that comes into our practice every day. No, a great ape, obviously. So this is a typical scenario that you see in your offices, right? Lady comes in, red, hot, swollen foot. She's been to her PCP, blah, blah, blah. And you start listening to the history. And this is unfortunately very common in our modern Western society, one of the best, funded health systems in the world. What happens to this lady? This is what you find out what happened to her the last few months. She had a workup for DVT, of course, right? Does that not happen? Then she's referred to physical therapy because the DVT was negative. Physical therapy, oh my gosh, she's worse. There's more edema. Oh, I guess she has cellulitis. So let's put her in the hospital. Let's give her IV antibiotics. Let's give her some unnecessary IV antibiotics. Oh, well, she's not getting better. Let's get a bone scan. So okay, then she definitely has osteomyelitis. So we need more unnecessary IV antibiotics. Let's put her into renal failure, okay? It just goes on. And eventually somebody's, let's maybe consider that x-ray is not osteomyelitis, on and on. So you guys see this every day. It's very frustrating, is it not? So not to point out what we already know, but this is very recent. Look at this, 2017. So this is a brand new article I found. They surveyed 749 physicians at the University of Michigan, obviously one of the top places in the world, unless you're from Ohio State. So, 400 responded, and the gist of it all, rather than going through all the complicated parts, most physicians out there, these were endocrinologists in primary care, have no idea what Charcot is. 60% had no idea what it was. Is that baffling? You don't get this in med school if you're, we hear it all the time. It's like, oh yeah, Charcot, 30% of my practice sometimes. But it's a big deal. So if you think about how many people are out there, there's, in this country alone, just from diabetes alone, well over 50,000 people walking around with Charcot. And yeah, I could go through all the statistics, blah, blah, blah. You know all this stuff. It screws up your quality of life. You lose productivity, reduce life expectancy, like Dr. Jacobs was saying yesterday. If you have Charcot, your life expectancy on average is less than 8 years from the time you get it. So it's a pretty dramatic thing, you know. Like a diabetic foot ulcer, your life expectancy is somewhere around 5 years, you know, on average, with a newly diagnosed. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. So why isn't more being done about it? I mean, we take this big thing about breast cancer. Your risk of dying within 5 years of a diabetic foot ulceration is significantly higher than breast cancer. With the new diagnosis, some of you guys already know this, but you know, there's slides and I could bore you to death with that, but you already know all this stuff. So there was a Charcot task force, and you know, David Armstrong was in it, and everything. And these two guys, if you want to read about Charcot, Dane Werkich and Michael Pinzer out of Loyola, Dane Werkich out of University of Texas now. You know, just great guys. Just Google stuff. You can PubMed. You can learn all this stuff yourself. But there's this task force recommended algorithm, and at least it's a talking points in diabetes care. You'll forget what I just told you, so just later Google diabetes task force. You can look it up, and it's nice to have like an article or something like that handy, so that when your internal medicine or physician assistant that sends it to you, or your primary care, you can just like copy that article, shoot it to them, or send them a link if they send you like a staff message or something. You send them an email. You know, you'd be really surprised how grateful those family docs are. And I've had guys, I swear to God, I had a guy that treated a patient for gout for like months, before I finally, I'm like, and I educated him on Charcot. He had no freaking idea what Charcot was. It was unbelievable. Now, this guy was an alcoholic, so he was a little bit out of the realm, but, he had alcoholic neuropathy, he had Charcot, he was treated for gout. So you can get out there and you can be the person that sends that article, that sends that email with a link or whatever. I'm telling you, you get so much back from that, and then you are raised so much higher in the respect of the medical community because you're helping kind of educate them a little bit. And it's nothing, derogatory toward them. It's just like they just don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So I'm just going to skip ahead. So I'm just going to talk about midfoot Charcot. Why? Because 60% of the Charcot we see is midfoot. I'm just going to kind of hone this talk down a little bit. I'm not going to talk about ankle fractures, not going to talk about osteo. This is the kind of stuff you see in the office. The vast majority, and in fact, if you look at Werkich's articles, he says well over 60%. In his practice, he treats essentially non-operatively or just minimally operative. So they have a big spike of bone like that, causes an ulcer on the bottom of the foot. You all see that. You all know what to do. You just trim it down. Goes away. That's pretty shortly post-op. It's basically healed. Put them in insoles. I use a lot of the Darco wound healing shoe. You can layer it. I always change the layers. How they come in the box don't make sense to me, so I change the layers and put orange, white, blue, pink, carve out the white a little bit, wherever the spot is. Super easy. This is another one. You see this all the time. This is a non-operative foot. This lady's totally happy with a Crow Walker. This is a non-operative foot in my mind. She is low demand. She's happy. She doesn't work. She just, eats pizza. She's totally fine. I'm fine. She's fine. Great. I'm not. There's no way in hell I would operate on this lady. You'd be nuts. She's never really ulcerated. She has a little callus. We talk about emollients, blah, blah, blah. No way. And she's got a cool-looking Crow Walker with butterflies, and she thinks it's cool. So I'm like, okay, great. I'm done with you. I'm not going to talk about osteo. So this is a guy with Charcot, horrible infection. I had a video that didn't play, but it was like pus was just roaring out of this thing. There he is to the right, 5 years later, totally happy, completely healed, never Charcot again. Why? Because he's incredibly compliant. I mean, besides his big belly, this guy's like incredibly compliant. This is like your ultimate guy to take care of, because even though he's fat, he's kind of like his sugar's not great, but he does what you say, and he wears his AFO all the time. He's never ulcerated again. Charcot's never got any worse. He's just diligent about his care. So I'm not going to talk about that guy. This is what I'm going to talk about, okay? I'm just going to hone it down to this one little area, geographic area, just because it's kind of interesting, and maybe it'll stick in your head, and just like a different concept. It's a concept that's been out there since the 90s, but it's one of those that comes in the office and you say, "What the heck was?" That's what you say. What the heck was that? Okay, so this is the lady in that slide, and I have just quite a few. I'm just going to throw cases in because I thought it'd be more interesting in the day. So she's 42. very much the same scenarios that one I showed you earlier. She's worked up for DVT for 3 months, for crying out loud. Nobody got an x-ray. Somebody finally got an x-ray. Her diabetes was horribly controlled. A1C of 10.5. Nobody in this country, in this rich country, should have an A1C of 10.5. It's just absolutely just criminal. So this is not an operative candidate to me at this point. She's got a 10.5. I said, look, go back to your PCP. I actually called her new one. I said, look, this lady is like not an operative candidate. She's got an operative problem, but I am not touching her at 10.8. Fix it. She did. She was dying like at 7 within like a few months. I was like, okay, great. It was 6 months. She was under 7. I said, well, and she literally was 42, and she is miserable. Almost unbraceable. She had not quite ulcerated, but you could just tell. And this is an impending BK, right? I mean, probably. Her forefoot is basically sitting in midfoot. So, if you look at her Meary's angle, I would say it's a little bit off. Okay, so when you have pathology, you look at the pathology, you break it down. What is wrong here? So what else is wrong? Well, she's got a pretty good calcaneal pitch, just happens to not be in the right place relative to her leg, okay? So what else is wrong? Well, who the hell knows what's going on over on the right? But she's got, obviously, a deformity of her midfoot as well. So those typically, drift into varus or valgus, and you just have to look at each one. And if you read all the articles and you kind of, you're interested in doing this stuff, you slowly develop a systematic approach to looking at each one of these cases. You break them down and you try to fix the problem, but you fix it in a systematic way and address each problem that comes along your way. So what are some of the problems? Well, Achilles tendon is just abnormal in these people. They're stiff, they don't move. So to fix it, you got to fix the Achilles tendon, you got to realign the hind foot, you got to realign the midfoot, you got to distract them sometimes, and you want to use something nice and big and fat that's going to hold up, that's not going to wear out. So you have sagittal plane stress. Yeah, sagittal plane stress. Okay, so you fix that with a percutaneous tendo-Achilles lengthening. You can do that from a supine position. This is not me, but it's tiny little incisions. Why do they have to have a TAL? Not all of them, but a large majority, because their Achilles tendon is not normal. They have glycosylated collagen fibers. You guys know all this. And your Young's modulus flaccidity is just not normal. It's stiff. So, and then the other issues you want to look at is obviously varus valgus. They have kind of, you start to see like a fracture pattern, and some of the articles, talk about this. You start to see the fracture pattern, and you have to address, based on how you approach it, correcting the varus valgus. And understanding the medial and lateral columns of the foot, certainly important. The biomechanics of how to fix them is important. So, and you guys all know this about the tension side. And Dr. Latimer had some, excellent comments about tensile strength and compressive strength and the difference. Well, plates are used on the tensile side of a fracture, so that's why you'd want to use a plantar plate if you're trying to repair, Charcot in the midfoot. But plates are just damn difficult to put on. I don't know if you guys that do much Charcot work, they're hard to put on, they're time-consuming. You never quite feel that good about it. It's hard to get the screws to purchase where you want, blah, blah, blah. So, and there's actually not a lot of bone stock, especially when you try to plate back around the talus or even the lateral column of the foot. There's just a lot of anatomy that gets in the way. You got to move your peroneals, on and on. So this newer concept, so to speak, beaming screws came out a few years ago, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but it's a load-sharing concept. So instead of trying to support the tensile strength of bone, you're trying to load share. So that's why you want to use something big and hardy and healthy. And most of these screws and everything that were originally used were for hip fractures. So these were hip fracture screws that then got used in the foot. And so now there's all these newer ones that are coming out. So again, the objective is to get this back into a more normal angle. So Meary's angle, everybody knows what Meary's angle is. It's the bisection of the talus and the first metatarsal. So you want to get that Meary's angle back. Why? Because most of the articles that talk about this, or especially the more recent ones, talk about Meary's angle restoration is the most important component to fixing these midfoot Charcot problems. Okay? So alignment and getting that Meary's angle right back where it belongs. So William Grant has done most of this. He's kind of the one that came up with most of this. He's out of in Virginia. So Charcot midfoot. So again, keep it all straight. Keep a systematic approach. So if I say here, we're talking about distracting the midfoot. So if you're going to fix something, you wouldn't go out to your car with a pair of tweezers to fix your car, right? No, you need a big wrench if you're going to torque on something, or you got to have the right tools. So these big femoral distractors are very handy. And if you look at some of the articles and you see like the surgical repair, you can tell they weren't able to, they didn't they didn't fix the problem, all right? So you want to be able to fix the problem. So we take these femoral distractors, we put them in tibia, calcaneus, and we distract this out. If you think going into the OR that you can physically pull that heel back into place, you are like fantasizing. It is so stiff, so hard, you just physically cannot do it. I don't care how strong your resident is or whoever's in the OR, you cannot do it. So you have to have something in there mechanically to give you mechanical advantage. So you do the TAL, put your distractor on, it pulls the hind foot down. You can also use the distractor for the midfoot. So let me show you how you look at it. Put it in the tibia, one in the calcaneus. We go high in the calcaneus so you don't rip through, because like Dr. Latimer said, that bone is very trabecular, thin. There's not a big cortex, so you want to stay high on it so you don't tear it up. And then just slowly, as you're working on the case, we just keep cranking and distracting as the case goes on. We leave it on for the whole time. It makes for a nice little bar. You can move the foot around, and you can see slowly the heel's coming down. And once we get it kind of a little better, it looks like everything's going to be good. Obviously, we use a lot of C-arm to make sure we get it where we want it. Open up the medial and lateral. We use some power. Typically, most all this is done by hand. At least that's how we're doing it. Use the Osteotome's mallet. Synthes has a nice joint prep set. Basically, you just chop all those bones and you get them so that you can line the forefoot up on the hind foot. It's not rocket science, really. As long as you understand what normal anatomy is, you just get all those bones. The difficult thing a lot of times, though, is the cuneiforms and the cuboid can literally be glued to the plantar surface of the foot. So you have to really know your anatomy, and you have to really understand three-dimensionally abnormal, twisted around anatomy so that you don't pull the lateral artery out when you're, when you're reaching and pulling those bones out. So as long as you're willing to do all that, and I highly suggest you get a cadaver lab and practice, and just mess around with this stuff on cadavers, and really understand your anatomy. But the anatomy is screwed up in these, and they're very difficult. But the whole objective is just to basically chop medial lateral, varus valgus. You straighten that out, and then you run your temporary fixation in. You see we got nice reduction of the hind foot. Again, with that femoral distractor, there's no way in hell to be able to do it without that. And you can see there was an ulcer on the bottom plantar lateral of that foot, and it's already softer and looks better. It's right there. Okay, so external fixation frames, do we need them? Some cases, not all cases. Why? It helps hold everything in place, and mainly it's to help the soft tissue seal. I mean, I think that's a big component of it, to hold everything in place while everything knits back together. All right, so then we run these beaming screws in. You want these nice big beaming screws that they hold. So again, there she is, pre and post. You want to get a nice reduction. You have everything back in place. You can see where the femoral distractors went in. Kind of high in the calcaneus, nice stable point in the tibia. All right, and that's kind of your end goal. And her A1C was 7.3 just not that long ago. So she's actually been pretty compliant. So here's another case, show you one that I'm not as happy about. So this lady I did actually a few years ago before we started using the femoral distractor. Again, plantar plate, combination with the beaming screw that we were using at the time. This lady had a lot of work at St. Elsewhere before I saw her. She'd had multiple planings, blah, blah, blah. So why somebody put a screw in the fifth toe, I have no idea. Who in the hell puts a screw in the fifth toe? I have no idea. That's the craziest thing. But anyway, that's one of her many very odd operations she'd had done. So she had this ulcer, and her cuboid was essentially just really down. She was a very varus, rotated foot with a cuboid plantarly displaced, and just continuously ulcerated and was very unstable. So we plated it. I did a TAL to take the stress off. We took all the bumps off, but I just wasn't really that happy with it. So that's why we switched to really trying to get that Meary's angle a lot better. She's still doing okay. I mean, she's in a kind of a funky AFO. So there's just another case. Now this is just another example of probably what not to do. This was a case that was sent to me from, he actually came to me from a pretty good foot and ankle guy, ortho guy from the West. But anyway, so you look at this and you try to use the failures to say, to look at what went wrong, what can you do to make it better? Well, if you look at the little components here, see that little anchor right there? Okay, obviously that's an anchor, and I'm just guessing an attempt was made to repair the tib anterior after the procedure, you wouldn't really want to do that because it's the deforming force. You'd rather lengthen the tib anterior. And you can see the screw broke here. Why? Well, it was placed all right, but probably too small a screw for what was being done. And also there was really no lateral support. So, the whole objective we try to do is predict the future. And when this was put in, you probably could predict that it would fall apart, and it did. So again, same systematic approach. Look at it the same way, all pretty much the same, restore Meary's angle. But this guy's a little bit different. If you have somebody who already has hardware in, highly recommend that in the OR, you have an emergency screw removal set. Everybody has those in your hospitals, okay? If you don't have one and you've got hardware you're taking out of an ankle fracture or whatever, I always have some kind of emergency screw removal set, because even if you have the wrench from the actual set that it was put in with, like a synthesis screwdriver or whatever, you got to have these emergency screw removal sets, because this stuff can be impossible to take out. And you don't want to be that guy that's been in the OR for 3 hours trying to take out a screw. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating for you, as well as, it just makes everybody look bad. And it's just, it's not good medicine. So I encourage you to get these emergency screw removal sets out, play with them. If you don't know what all those little parts are, because it's a whole different animal, it's a totally different game using these things, have your rep come in, play with those things, and really learn how to take out broken screws and all that. Or don't do it. That's your other option. If you have broken screws, just don't do it. Because what looks easy is often not. So if you go back to this guy here, see that screw broken off in the talus? I mean, that's going to make your anal sphincter tighten a little bit, right? That's damn difficult to get out because it's a solid screw. It's not a cannulated screw that was used, right? Solid screw, and it's buried in the talus. Like, how are you going to get that out? You're going to core it out from the back? You can't do that. It would ruin his ankle. It would ruin his hindfoot. You can't core it out from the front. No, if you have the right equipment, we had that out in about 30 seconds. So little jig went right over the screw, backed it right out, we're done. But it was in this Stryker spine set. So just make sure you have the right tools. A lot of it's planning. We planned that case out very well. We had everything available. We had it out in no time. So this guy, you repair, beaming screws again. We put the right size. We put 8/0 screws, nice big titanium anodized screws. You can see his toes. A lot of these have little ancillary things, I'll say, like his toes were crooked, so we kind of just, pop some K-wires in just to kind of keep everything straighter. And there's pre and post. Broken to left. Put the X-Fix on him because, honestly, he just really needed it. He had lost a lot of bone mass. A lot of that bone in the bottom was just so. Anyway, this is just to show you like some angular, just little tips. When you shoot the medial column screw in, ideal position is right there, center talus. You want to be a little low on the talus on the lateral view. Right down the pike, get that lateral screw in. Just goes through little tiny holes. So it's, pretty easy. Just lateral screw goes through a little tiny hole. I'll show you later. And you just try to restore Meary's angle and just get everything back into place. Here's one more, just kind of going through just a bunch of variety. So this is a case I did. She had a Liz Frank fracture. I was real proud of myself. I fixed it, 10 years ago. And then she went on later to Charcot. I didn't know. She got worse or something. She came back and oh, great, now you turned into a Charcot case, which she wasn't before. So anyway, so she kept ulcerating medial. She's very abducted. Ulcerated medial on her AFO, and I sent her a million times. I even planed her once, couldn't get it better. So we decided to fix it. So took her back, realigned everything, took those plates out, restored the alignment of the foot, got Meary's angle pretty decent, and she's been fine, ulcer-free and back in AFO and functioning reasonably well. All right. So again, post-op, what do you do? Well, first off, use nice, big, healthy screws to keep it stable. If you use a frame, this is kind of what I do, and it's probably similar to what most other people do. One thing is I always use a contact cast, at least for 3 months afterwards. I don't use cam walker boots. I've had too much trouble with them. We have a very special contact cast we put on, and it's extremely stable, and I just trust people with it. So, because 100% of your patients walk. Of your non-weight bearing patients, 100% walk, guaranteed. I can show you articles that prove that. So why 8mm beaming screws? Because the 6.5 screws break. Anything smaller, just freaking breaks. It's gonna break. So I just pulled up some other just random photos I could find, on the internet, what other people are doing. So Michael Pinzer out of Loyola, obviously one of the best guys. He throws this extra little screw down the second. I mean, he's a lot better than I am. I just never think there's that much real estate. So he does that. So just so you know, it looks like he does a retrograde from the calc. I mean, you could do that. It just seems a little difficult to me. So just different ways of throwing it. This is from the podiatry literature. Kind of screws going everywhere. There's a whole discussion about the subtalar joint, whether to fuse or not. I'm sure somebody would have a question on that, so you don't have to ask it because I don't know. Okay. Wright Medical was out here today, and I just happened to see they had a bolt. I actually just stuck this in my lecture. This isn't even on the market yet. I think this was actually developed through William Grant because I think he's a consultant for Wright. But, you know, it's a big 8-millimeter bolt. Whether it's going to be any better, I don't know. As long as it's easy and quick to put in, that's what counts. So, all right, so this is a video of my daughter. I don't know if it's going to run or not. Not too good. I have absolutely no reason to put this in the lecture other than she's just really cute. And I thought I'd break up the lecture a little bit. And I want to show you how the proper way to eat cheesecake. So if we're demonstrating different techniques, I just thought you'd want to share that with you. And so that's carrot cake. That was her third piece. Yeah, she was, yeah, anyway, so just to move along. All right, so total contact cast, just briefly. I like to leave them on minimum 3 months. The majority of our patients, when we first see Charcot, especially grade 0 Charcot, they come in, they're red hot swelling, get MRI, it shows it's hot, I put them in a contact cast because you know they're going to walk on it. You put them in anything they can take off, they will take it off. You can do that little cheater one with the boot and wrap, you know, like Armstrong talks about. I mean, that's an option. I've just had people ulcerate in boots, so they just make me nervous. So this is how we do a contact cast. We literally just glue the felt right to the skin. We wrap it all around. We take plastizotes, slide it down in the back, make it super comfortable, put foam in the front, all around, felt in the back, foam on the sides. If you want this, I can send it to you. Literally just make it so it just cannot be damaged. It holds everything in place. It's solid as a rock. We almost never ulcerate with those. The toes don't have problems. They cannot take it off. It works. And we put a shoe on it, and I say, you know, walk on it because you're going to anyway. But I tell you know, try not, I say walk as least you can, but you know they're going to walk on it anyway. So that's just our version of a contact cast. I have a cast tech that does that. I'm very privileged in having that. That's the only help I have. This is one more case just to kind of wrap it up. This is a 52-year-old guy, super nice guy, independently wealthy. His family kind of was in the early stages of Steris, so I mean, he's just a super nice guy. He'd had previously cavus foot, blah, 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 just to go along. Basically not diabetic. His maximum A1C ever in his life was 7.1, all right? So you got to realize, just because somebody's he's not on any diabetic medication, so you have to have a very low threshold, but he's neuropathic. All Charcot, neuropathic. If you're not neuropathic, you don't have Charcot. If you don't have if you don't have a hot MRI or, you know, you're not Charcot. So, but have a low index of suspicion for it. And I think almost half the cases I showed you, they were marginal or not diabetic. But he does drink, okay? So I suspect that probably played a role. Neurology workup, yeah, he's got peripheral sensory neuropathy, no real reason why. He had an old ankle fracture, I found this. He had an ankle fracture repaired at the clinic a few years ago, the main campus. They did a nice job. You really can't see any Charcot on the lateral view, maybe a little something happening, but he was thought to have a cavus foot, was all set up to have a first MPJ fusion elsewhere, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so long story short, he ended up with Charcot. He was in this big old giant crow walker when he hits my office. He's from way, way east of Cleveland. Big giant crow walker. He has midfoot ulcer, daily wound care. He wanted a BK, or he was thinking about a BK, and two people had told him he needed a BK. So this is the guy, super nice guy. And, you know, on and on. This thing has been going on forever, and he's just really sick of it. This is a tough case to manage. I don't know if you guys manage Charcot too much, but this is a tough case to manage. So this is what we're dealing with. So the other problem with him, if you look how wide that forefoot is, all right, or that midfoot, so that's why he's basically unbraceable. All right? So you look at that, you can see how that medial cuneiform is literally just about to pop through the skin. So this is a very challenging case. Super nice, very compliant guy, though. So I think it's reasonable to give this a shot, not do a BK. My gut feeling is I just felt like he would do better long term if we could get him a more reasonable foot. So we followed the same criteria. Whether or not he needs a tendo Achilles lengthening, distractor. He actually did need to be distracted a little bit, and we did put an X fix on him, mainly because of just how much we had to push back together. And here he is. We used big 8mm beaming screws. Got rid of all that plantar, prominence that he had on the bottom. He's still consolidating at this phase here. But there you can see his before and after. So Miri's angle is good. Miri's angle's good, right? So we achieved kind of what we were trying to do. There he is shortly after coming out of one of his contact casts. See, everything's starting to mold together nicely, looking a little better. Little dry skin areas. Some of these have little minor wound problems. Some of these have bigger wound problems that you have to deal with. You have to be ready for that. Dr. Jacobs in his lecture talked about how the Charcot have wound healing issues, and it's a separate thing. So he's pre and post after he came out of his contact cast. So this shows you just kind of the direction of how those beaming screws go in. So just a little tiny hole through the first MBJ, runs literally right through the joint on the bottom. You shoot it right up into the talus. And then from the fourth met, run it right down into the calcaneus from the other side. Okay, so hopefully you got a good, clear idea. So here he is now. I just actually saw him, he's pretty much done. I mean, he's normal at this point. And still a little puffiness, but no prominence, no ulcer. His foot looks pretty close to normal. I mean, I'll take that. It's not perfect, but he's got a little still residual mallet toe, but that's an acceptable foot, a little puffy. I think these just stay puffy forever. And he's been wearing his AFO. We have him a double upright because that works best for him personally. And how long is he going to wear that? Probably forever. Maybe he can use molded insoles in the future. Prominence is gone. Certainly a lot better than it was pre-op. And so that's kind of the goal you're trying to get to. So take-home points. Charcot is poorly understood by the medical community. And again, try to have some articles just handy. In fact, have some articles handy, especially articles written by podiatry that you have in your office on various conditions. And when somebody comes in your office and you have a referral from your medical doc or whatever, just shoot them that article or send them the link or something. I'm telling you, they're always very, very appreciative. If I get staff messages, I'll say what my recommendation is, and I'll put little numbers on my recommendation at the bottom as the references of the journal articles that they can link to if they don't believe what I said. So why not? It takes an extra 10 minutes. It's way, way more valuable than trying to do any other marketing campaign. That's your best marketing campaign, is just raise your level of care. So consider beaming screws, contact cast, and you got to continue supportive therapy, indefinitely. So that is it. How was that? Done.